Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Today I'm going to present the First Art project. That is a project that we have here in IPT going on as we speak. It's a project that started 2 years ago with an Interreg application for the European Commission that started by working in two caves, one in south of Portugal called Escoural Cave, and another one in the southwest of Spain called Maltravieso Cave. And the project started with these two caves, and I'm going to explain why and what is the work that we have done so far. Both caves have prehistoric art. And now actually the First Art project has expanded for more than 30 caves in different parts of the world. And I'm also gonna give a resume of how the work is doing so far. So the project started in two caves, as I mentioned, Escoural and Maltravieso. And one of them, at least, if you are aware of the bibliography regarding the recent dates for Paleolithic art in Spain, especially the ones that actually put the chronology of Paleolithic art quite earlier than we thought, opening the debate about the Neanderthal art, if the Neanderthals were had the ability and the capacity to do rock art or not. This is the debate. It started because in Maltravieso, Ardales, and La Pasiega, three caves, one in the north center and one in the south of Spain, some dates using a uranothorium chronological method actually came up with really, really early dates for Paleolithic rock art, specifically for some signs figures that we found in the caves. So this was the beginning of a very big debate that is still going on today. And this project came across with the need actually for to make a documentation, a very complete documentation of Cueva of Maltravieso in Maltravieso. And this is the location of both caves. They are not far away, that far away. They are more or less around 2 hours by car from each other. But one of the characteristics that they have is that they actually have a history of research very similar. They were found more or less at the same time, with some years apart. They were both quarry sites, and so the history of finding and the research that they had after in the next decades, it's quite similar. So the idea was, and both of them were facing the lack of a systematic documentation. They had studies before, but they were done a long time ago. So both of them were lacking documentation studies, analytical studies, the use of the new technology for both caves. So it was an opportunity to join both caves in one project and to do a set of goals that would actually involve the entire catalog of both caves that didn't exist so far, to do analytical studies like the composition of pigments, new datations using uranothorium methods, and to draw a conservation plan for both caves with the material that we would have on this project. So this was a quite interesting project, I think. This is Escoural Cave. It's actually the only cave in Portugal that has Paleolithic rock art until today, or the only one that is known to have Paleolithic art. This is more or less a scheme of the cave today. It's a visitable cave, unlike Maltravieso. Maltravieso, it's actually closed to visitors. They have an interpretation center. And in Escoural Cave, the cave is still possible to visit, a small part of the cave, and it also has an interpretation center that actually was renewed within the First Art project recently. So the first part of this project was actually to focus on the documentation. We had an idea because of other studies, late studies on both caves on what kind of figures and how many panels there were in each cave. But for Escoural, mainly, there was a big lack of studies for the last decades. There had been very important studies in the 90s mainly, but it was already a good opportunity to use new technology in Escoural Cave and to find more things. So Escoural Cave has both paintings and engravings. We start by doing a prospection of the entire cave, and then we used also 3D technology to make the 3D of the entire cave of Escoural. Escoural Cave is a quite small cave, but actually it's quite complicated in terms of shape. It's not very easy to work, and it was a big challenge, not only to make the documentation, and it's a non-contact documentation, meaning that everything was done through photography. Touching paintings and engravings, it's not in question. It's forbidden. It's not done for conservation issues, of course. So it was a non-contact documentation of both paintings and engravings. Each one of these techniques actually requires different types of lighting and documentation skills. And then mainly our work, it's based a lot on digital documentation of what we done. So we did not only digital photography, but we also did photogrammetry of all the panels and the 3D of the entire cave. These are some results of the engravings and paintings from Escoural. And we also had the opportunity of, with the full scan of the cave, this is still in raw format, we can have the possibility of making virtual visits to the entire cave, since only a part of this cave is visitable today. So we can have a better explanation of the panels. People can actually know better the cave without having to go there, because in the near future, this type of sites probably will be even more restricted to visitation due to conservation issues. A big part of the work that is going on now, it's the documentation, so the tracing methodology, digitally speaking, that we are trying to do the drawings through the photographies. This is basically the part that we are doing now, finding new figures, both paintings and engravings, because using new technology really is quite helpful on seeing things that we didn't see before. And these are some of the drawings that we can actually do and present, not only for books, articles, or the catalog, but even for virtual visitations or explanations, or to feed the new interpretation center of this coral cave. So these are some of the examples that of the documentation that we are working right now. This is an example of the paintings, and in this case, a new technology that we have been using in the last decade called D-Stretch. It's actually quite helpful because it helps us to see things, paintings, figures, painted figures, sometimes that if we can't see it with our naked eye, we can actually see it with this technology. So this has been quite helpful because it gives us the possibility to see things that normally we wouldn't see in a normal photography. Some of you that already had rock art classes had the chance to check this plugin. This is a plugin that we are using in rock art. It's called D-Stretch, and I would invite you all to see the website regarding this this technology, and you can actually see how it works. But the use of D-Stretch has been quite helpful in both caves, because through it we can actually find new figures that nobody knew that they existed before. It's also quite helpful to see better superimposition of figures. So this actually helps us to understand a little bit better the distribution of the figures within the cave and the different composition or superimpositions that we have between different figures. For the Escoural Cave, we have a total of around 92 panels, not figures, okay? So the amount of figures is going to be quite larger because there are panels that have more than one figure. We have superimpositions, and even more interesting, we have superimpositions between two different techniques, engravings and paintings. So actually, this is going to give us a much more clear idea and more complete idea of what's going on in Escoural Cave in the near future. Doing a good documentation in a rock art site, it's not only for research purposes, but actually can help us to do quite good material for interpretation of the cave purposes. So the work that we are doing is actually being used not only for the scientific purposes of understanding the rock art of Escoural Cave, but actually it's being used also to build new exhibitions, new catalogs, new information for the public, is being used on the new interpretation center. So it's actually not a different way, but a more complete way of using the scientific material that we are working on in Escoural. Regarding the Maltravieso cave, Maltravieso had, in the last few decades, a little bit more complete work. It's a cave that's never been stopped of doing research. Actually, there are quite a few publications that you can find online regarding the cave of Maltravieso. But there was a need, especially in Maltravieso, of doing the 3D of the entire cave because Maltravieso, unlike Escoural, it's in really danger in what concerns conservation issues. Maltravieso, it's a city cave, which means that it's literally in the middle of the city of Cáceres. So it's facing much more conservation issues than Escoural Cave. And the need to make a virtual copy of the cave and even thinking in the future of making a replica of the cave is real. So there was part of the focus of the First Art project in Maltravieso was not the documentation per se, because the documentation was actually quite updated, but the part of doing a 3D of the entire cave, so we could actually access better the conservation issues of this cave. So this is the results, or part of the results of the 3D of the cave. It was actually quite well done. It was used quite updated technology and a sort of technology that with a drone inside the cave that couldn't touch the walls. So there are all the step of the project, there is a very big concern of the conservation of the paintings inside the caves. So we also have to be aware of that when we are using new technology. This is a cloud point of the Maltravieso cave. It's a bigger cave it's bigger than Escoural, and the conservation issues are quite bigger, and especially because Maltravieso is known for having some dozens of hand stencils. This is what made Maltravieso famous. There are animals and symbols in Maltravieso cave, but the main part that it's famous for, and there are already some publications regarding the hand stencils of Maltravieso, it's because of these type of figures. And it was these type of figures that actually came out with the early dates from 66,000 years old, when they start doing the chronological datation with uranium thorium. So the documentation of the Maltravieso, it's quite updated. There is a book that you can find online for free regarding hand stencils in all Iberian Peninsula prehistoric art. It's quite interesting, and if you are interested in this subject, you should download it. And this is how the use of new technology actually is helping us to find things that we can't see with our eyes. This is a very good example because if you look at the image on your left, it's literally impossible to see anything. And even in the site is even harder because it's a dark place and we are dependent of artificial light. So the use of new technology, for example, this stretch, it's actually showing us much more things that we can actually see. So Montrevieso also has a very interesting set of animal engravings, very thin, very hard to understand as well. And in generally speaking, Maltravieso has a set of more than 500 figures, which is a lot for a cave like Maltravieso. It's not that it's a big cave, but the set of hand stencils inside the cave, it's 60, which is a very big amount of hand stencils for only one cave in Iberian Peninsula, which is very interesting. The figures in Maltravieso is also, they are spread more or less along all cave. And this is also the use of technologies like GIS help us to understand the location distribution and different techniques distribution along the cave. And this is the book that you can download online that talks only about the Maltravieso cave. All the documentation that has been done in the First Art project, all the studies that have been done in the past and in the present in the Maltravieso cave, and a good discussion on the chronology of the figures. First Art project also concerns the conservation issues of the cave. Caves are very fragile environments, and today there are a lot of rules of how to visit a cave with prehistoric art, because we know today that our breathing and the dirt from our shoes can actually intervene in the conservation of the cave, can actually create things that will damage the paintings of caves. Part of the First Art is also a big archaeometric study on both the archaeometric characteristics of the pigments. We want to know what they were made of and the conservation issues that we are facing today on different figures. And also in the chronological framework for both caves. So we are trying to confirm or not the dates from Montrevieso rock art, and we are for the first time having some results, interesting results for Escoural Cave that soon I think you will be able to see in publications. Uranothorium method, it's the method that we are using that actually makes a datation not of the pigments itself directly, but on the calcite that are covering the figure. So it's giving us a maximum age for the calcite, parting from the idea that the pigments are under the calcite would be older than the chronology that we are having. So generally speaking, the material of both caves, documentation and results, are being used to create different materials for the public, not only for the public, this can actually be used also for the scientific purposes, but especially for Maltravieso Cave, there's a very big demanding of showing characteristics of the cave only through virtual assets because of the conservation issues that the cave is facing. Another big part of this project is we are trying to replicate parts of the cave in small replicas to show to the public, since the cave it's actually closed, and this could be a good way of replicating parts of the cave to show to the public or to the school public in different ways. There is a petition now, there is a political movement right now in Spain also to try to raise funding, enough funding, to make the entire replica of Maltravieso Cave. Probably it's going to be done in the near future to try to actually minimize the conservation issues of the real cave. And in the last year, the First Art project actually enlarged the amount of sites that is working on. We've been working in north of Spain, in Cantabria and Asturias. We still work in Maltravieso. We are working south of Spain, and we already have a set of more than 30 caves that we are trying to work on checking for the chronology of what we consider the first figures in humanity, the first art figures in humanity. Right now, just for you be aware of what does a project like this means, there is a lot of different disciplines, colleagues, laboratories, and work to be done. We right now have around 21 researchers from different countries like Spain, Portugal, UK, Italy, Germany, China, and USA working with us. We have 7 different laboratories that are processing samples, both of pigments and calcite on the top of the pigments. We are doing analysis and characterization of the pigments. We are doing datations, and we are trying to find DNA in the pigments. This is a new thing that hasn't been done before, and because we know that for people to paint would actually manipulate the pigments with their hands or spit or other things, we have the possibility, we hope, to find old ancient DNA in these pigments. So this is part of what we are actually working right now on First Art. And I think that in the near future, you will be able to see more updates on this project. Thank you very much.